Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our program is about to begin. Welcome Andrew Friedman, General Manager and Head of Public Affairs of Semafor.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Come on in. I think we've got a couple folks in the back. We still have a few chairs back there. I'm Andrew Friedman, General Manager and Head of Public Affairs at Semafor. Pleasure to have you here this evening with us for Architects of the New Economy. When Semafor launched just 3 years ago, we set out with a simple but ambitious idea: to build the leading global media platform for a world defined by complexity, interdependence, and accelerating change. At the core of this, though, is our global live journalism. Tonight's convening, I heard it earlier, it's our 97th live journalism event of the year. That spans 4 continents, 5 countries in the US, Washington, New York, San Francisco, and we've built our flagship Semafor World Economy platform into a must-attend program for the world's most connected and powerful CEOs and global leaders. Tonight's conversation will focus on the decisions made here in Washington that are rewriting global economics. Our new annual report, Architects of the New Economy, and you should definitely scroll through it if you haven't been to semafor.com and checked it out already, literally maps out the shifts in economic power and the key power players, some of whom you'll hear from tonight. The old dividing lines between left and right, competition and antitrust, free markets and state capitalism are changing and even blurring. And today, we'll hear from those on both sides of the aisle from Congress. We'll hear from folks in the White House on how they're redefining the rules of the new economy. But before we get started, a special thank you to our partners at Bank of America for making tonight's live journalism possible. Again, thanks for being here with Semafor on a Wednesday night. And with that, let's get to the news. Thanks.
Please welcome Ilana Shaw, Senior Washington Editor of Semafor, and Ben Smith, Co-founder and Editor-in-Chief of Semafor.
Hi. You don't need to clap. He works for me. Anyway, thank you guys for coming, and hello to the people on the live stream. Just as I think Senator Hawley is where is Senator Hawley? He's down here somewhere.
He's over here.
Is on his way up. We thought we would just explain a little bit about the origins of this project and the which really was about trying to understand kind of the new order in a realigned Washington, where obviously a chart like this 10 years ago is Republicans, Democrats, basically, and we sort of, so we spent a lot of time thinking about, how is Washington organized now? And we went through lots of versions of this chart. One of them, I think, involved the metro map. Sorry, that didn't make it. That was Ilana's. But Ilana and her team spent, a lot of hours really thinking about it. And where we landed, and where I think this was a very useful exercise for us, and I hope to sort of analyze, is that really there are two core divisions in today's Washington. And one is, and maybe the most important enduring one, is how do you think about the role of the state in the economy? And that's our, free market state capitalism axis. And if you look at that, it really crosses parties in a very interesting way. And I think that's in a way the shape of this realignment. The other axis, of course, is how much do you love Donald Trump? If you see this online, the he dances. But Ilana, so I guess I wonder if you could, in particular when it comes to the Republicans, I guess, who run the government right now, what do you learn from this analysis?
Well, when you say how much do you love Donald Trump, right? I mean, he's the president and he's uniquely bent Congress to his will. But take, for example, two of our esteemed guests tonight, Senator Hagerty and Senator Hawley. Both of them would correctly say we are close to Donald Trump. We are proud pro-Trump Republicans. But one of them, Senator Hagerty, is a more traditional free market Republican, albeit one who is supportive of tariffs. And Senator Hawley skews more populist. He wants tax-exempt health care. He's proposed tariff rebate checks to most Americans, which the rest of his party is more skeptical of. And yet they're both Trump Republicans. So there you have that inherent tension about what the president's movement and what he's done to the party really reflects.
Yeah, I mean, I got some calls this week about people either very pleased with or disputing elements of their placement on this chart. We accept appeals. But I guess I also want to ask about that. I guess the y-axis here.
Y,
is that
yeah.
the x-axis? The y-axis.
Y.
Which say is that the MAGA axis? Is that how do you think about that? That particularly in terms of the future of the Republican Party?
I mean, it's one way of looking at the MAGA axis. It's certainly how MAGA has tended to make economic policy so far. We are, though, just 1 year into this term, and a lot can change. I think the biggest and most important contrast, though, when it comes to what this project tells us about the future of Trump's movement and Trump's base is, look at Secretary of State Rubio. He's all the way north on that y-axis. Look at Senator Hawley and the vice president, much further below. So there, when it comes to who carries the torch for the future of this party, you have a pretty stark choice and that enduring tension sort of visually represented.
Yeah, and I guess the story of American politics, of movements, is it gets arbitrated in a presidential primary in the choice of the standard bearer of whom I think a number of these folks are going to wind up running.
It certainly tends to, and I would say, to be clear, we wanted to include Democrats in this as well. You see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also a little bit closer to south on this y-axis for a reason too, right? We know where she is on the x-axis, but the y tells us a lot about where economic policy is going for both parties.
Yeah, well hopefully Senators Hawley and Hagerty don't contest their placement on here when they're on here later. But Ilana, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and look forward to these conversations.
Should be exciting.
I'm trying to shake your hand.
Please welcome the Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley and Burgess Everett, Congressional Bureau Chief of Semafor.
All right, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Burgess Everett. I'm a Congressional Bureau Chief at Semafor. I've been covering Senator Hawley since he was a candidate back in Missouri, so we've known each other a long time. Thanks so much for coming here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Kind of what we're trying to figure out here is how has the realignment of your party, which we've talked about a bunch, how is that playing out now that Trump is president again? You've seen it in Trump 1.0, then you saw Biden, now it's Trump 2.0. How do you feel like the economy is working under President Trump, and what defines his economic policies?
Well, I mean, I think what defines his economic policies is what he ran on successfully, both in 2016 and again in 2024. I mean, he talked, I think what made him an attractive candidate both of those times is he talked about departing from the usual left-right axis and being a pro-worker candidate, transforming the Republican Party into what I would call a pro-worker party. His tariff policy, which is really a reindustrialization policy, I think is part of that. His effort to get up blue-collar wages is part of that. This is a guy who proposed in his first term and then did it again now this last year, proposed a cap on prescription drug prices nationwide, which I support. But, the idea that a Republican president would be proposing a global index for prescription drug prices in America, and I don't think before Donald Trump that would have been even thinkable. So right. I think that's the overall vision, and getting Congress to go along with that, I think, is a different story.
Well, why hasn't Congress gone along with something like that?
Well, on that in particular, because I think you've got a lot of folks, I wouldn't offend any of my colleagues in saying, it's just the truth, most of the elected party in Congress don't share the president's populist sort of blue-collar focus. That's not their overall ideology.
Still, even 7 years later after.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You cover these folks. I think that they don't like the tariffs. They don't like the drug pricing plan. They don't like the antitrust agenda. Congress is still full of very traditional Republicans, and some of those issues are great. But I think by and large, it's not what the president ran on. And I would just say if we're going to be a true majority party, we've got to get to a place where we are truly a blue-collar, pro-worker party.
Put you on the spot for a second. If you could give a grade to the Republican Congress as a partner to President Trump right now, what would you give it?
Well, the incomplete.
Okay.
the cop-out. Yeah, right, exactly. I would say at this point, we'd be not very strong grade at this point. Listen, I've been saying all week long, if I were President Trump, what I would want for Christmas is a Congress that would actually implement my agenda.
Right.
You talk about affordability, cost of living issues. I think the president has done all he can with an executive order. He has used that ability to the best of his ability. But listen, at the end of the day, only Congress can write law, and we're seeing on issue after issue, whether it's healthcare prices, whether it's prescription drug prices, whether it's wages, Congress really has to act. If you're going to get real results, Congress has to act. And I think you've seen a Congress that has not been as enthusiastic about his agenda as I would like.
You came in kind of with a head of steam on Monday. You were saying our leadership needs to have a plan for these healthcare subsidies. Yesterday they decided they're going to put up this Crapo-Cassidy plan, which creates health savings accounts to kind of replace the subsidies. Is that a good enough result? This bill's going to fail tomorrow. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's progress. Here's where I'm on this, Burgess. I am for trying everything that will get the cost of healthcare down across the board. So I would love to cap the cost of prescription drugs. We should do that. I think that we should say no taxes on healthcare. I think we ought to exempt all healthcare spending by consumers from taxes, just like we did with no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. We ought to do no taxes on healthcare. First dollar that you spend ought to be tax-free, including premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket, everything. But I am willing to consider and vote for just about anything that will bring down prices. So I think that Senator Cassidy's plan, Senator Crapo's plan, that'll be a big help with deductibles.
Yeah.
It will help with other out-of-pocket costs, and that's good. It does not do much for premiums, but listen, I think at this point, rather than sitting back and fly-specking and saying, well, I don't really like that, and I don't really like that, so therefore I just can't support it, I think we're at the point where the American people need all the help we can give them. So I'm an all of the above.
So could you vote for both of these proposals tomorrow?
Well, I think we need to do something.
Because just for everybody in the audience, there's a 3-year Democratic proposal to extend the enhanced premium subsidy tax credits tomorrow.
Right.
And could you support that?
I think we do need to do something on the cost of premiums. I've been saying I am not in the do-nothing camp. Several of my colleagues have proposed plans that will do something on premiums. Senator Sullivan, Senator Marshall, Senator Husted. So let's see where they get to. I understand we may have the opportunity to do something on some of those plans. I think we need to do something on premium cost. Premium cost is just out of control. It's one component of healthcare costs, but it's a big one. And in my state, I was just looking at the numbers on the way over here this afternoon. For a family of 4 in my state who buys their insurance on our state exchange, if these premiums are allowed to expire cold turkey, we're looking at increases of between 200 and 300%. For some families, it'll be 400%. These are right. These are just, that is not sustainable. The premiums are too high now. What people tell me when I go home now is, I cannot afford my premium. Wait till it goes up by 300%. We have to do something.
So I think you said today you were deliberately leaving the door open on the Democratic plan. Is that right? Voting for it potentially?
Yeah, well, here's the deal. Like I said, I'm in the all of the above camp, and I want to see what the options are going to be for bringing down premiums. I've said to my leadership, I've said it publicly many times, we need to do something on premiums. Yeah. I think that Senator Crapo, Senator Cassidy's plan is a great step forward on deductibles. I think that's tremendous. The president said he would rather see premium support come in the form of direct payment to taxpayers rather than insurance companies. That's great by me. I don't really care what the vehicle is.
Yeah.
But Burgess, I'm in the all of the above, consider all of it, but I'm not willing to sit back and do nothing. So I think we've got to keep taking the shots here that we can and get the American people all the help we can give them.
You're somebody who has kind of defined themselves as being willing to take outlier positions in your party and take the heat on that. Why not get in there and negotiate a deal with Bernie Sanders or something like that? Why not do that?
Well, I hope there will be an opportunity to try to reach some consensus, and believe me, I've been trying over the last, not just the last few days, but over the last few months on this issue. And, this has been an issue that's been very fraught for a number of reasons. Our leadership has not been interested in negotiating with Democrats on this. I think it's no secret.
They say publicly there could be an opportunity. Senator Thune will say, yeah, we could negotiate.
That's great. I hope there will be. And I hope that
you seem skeptical that they would do anything to prop up Obamacare.
Is
that right?
The best predictor of future performance is past performance. And what I've noticed in the last few months is that at the leadership level, there has been zero appetite to reach any kind of compromise, particularly on these premiums. And listen, I understand that you just used the word Obamacare. For a lot of people, that word is a talisman. It has huge significance. And there are so many people who have been here a lot longer than me, and they say, well, 15 years ago, I voted for this, or I didn't vote for that. I will never vote for whatever. I just have to say, as somebody who hasn't been here that long, those fights all predate me. Yeah. And I guess my sights are a little bit more practical, and that I want to do something that will help people now get their healthcare costs.
You're kind of saying put that past partisan divide on this behind you.
That's for me. That's what I have to do. So I'm I wasn't here for that. I get it. Listen, as Attorney General of the state of Missouri, I filed a lawsuit against Obamacare. If you told me, Josh, you get to take an up or down vote on Obamacare, I'd vote no. I think it's pretty clear the ACA exchanges are not working well for anybody. But that's really not the question in front of us right now. The question in front of us now
is what do you do about this immediate cliff?
That's right.
And you're saying do something.
Do something. Yeah. Do something that helps people, and then then let's take the next step. What are we going to do after that to help get healthcare costs down, whether it's prescription drugs, deductibles, premiums? We've got to keep, I think, working at this, and we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. The comprehensive healthcare plan, I said to somebody the other day, that the comprehensive healthcare solution, it's kind of like the white stag, that is rumored to be out there, but no one's actually ever seen.
Right.
So let's make sure that we actually get something that is real, and even if it's not perfect, let's take some steps forward.
What you talk to the president probably as much as any individual senator, maybe other than Senator Thune. What is your impression on what he wants on this issue?
Well, listen, I will never speak for the president. Sure. And I certainly don't want to do that on this issue. I think what he has said on this is that he wants costs to come down. He said that, let's think about what he said, that he wants costs to come down. He wants to cap the cost of prescription drugs. He would prefer that relief go directly to individuals rather than insurance companies. So he wants to change the delivery vehicle. That all sounds fine to me. In fact, that sounds great. The prescription drug piece, I think, is wonderful. I mean, imagine if Congress adopted Trump's policy and codified it, and I have a bill with Senator Welch that would do essentially just this, and put a price cap on all prescription drugs in this country, indexed to the price that they are in Europe and Canada. I mean, that would change the game for every single American.
And you saw how hard it was just for Democrats on their own to do that. They ended up with a pretty limited solution to that problem. So you would need to go the bipartisan route, do you think, to do that?
Burgess, I think that on issue after issue, just to be honest with you, I think that there is a bipartisan majority to be had on so many of these issues. The minimum wage, I think we ought to raise the minimum wage. I think we could do that with Democrat support and some Republican support. I think we ought to cap prescription drugs, their prices. We could do that with Democrat support and Republican support. I think we ought to pass new labor legislation. We could do that with Democrat support and Republican support. I think there's a wide open lane right down the middle there. And I don't mean so much the middle ideologically as the middle of the country, where the country is in terms of wanting results that will work for working families. I think that there are deals to be had. And boy, I'd love to see us get into that.
You're saying, like, get rid of this partisan paradigm on these issues.
Exactly.
Basically.
I think we ought to blow it up.
Is that just you saying that, or do you think there are others in your party and the Democrats who would be willing to do that? Because I think the Democrats probably think, hey, they got their reconciliation bill. We're going to sit back and maybe watch them struggle with this premium issue, for example, which is right front and center, but maybe other issues as well. I mean, are you concerned right now about Democrats thinking they have an advantage and you all are kind of plotting towards losing control of Congress?
Yeah, I am.
This trajectory?
I am. I think that if you're the Dems, I think it's very tempting to think, well, the Republicans have gotten themselves wrapped around the axle, the congressional Republicans at least, and so whether it's health care, whether it's wages, let's just sit back and see what happens. But I think I just think of so many of my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle who want to get things done, who are problem solvers, and who are really committed to helping people. And I think if you said to those folks, we got a chance to pass something that the president would sign.
Yeah.
A minimum wage increase, prescription drugs, I think they'd take it. I think they would take it. They'd say, absolutely, you give me a chance to do something like that, I will absolutely do it. So
I'm not hearing you say we should, as Republicans, should do another reconciliation package.
I'm all for that. I think that's fine. I think that's great. I just think when it comes to some of these issues you and I have been talking about just now, particularly healthcare, we tried certain healthcare reforms. We tried to tee those up in the first package, and a lot of those, frankly, just can't survive the bird bath, which is so technical. Listen, I learned a lot about bird this last go-around, more than I ever wanted to know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really technical. What I learned is that even the so-called experts on bird don't understand bird.
And there's like 3 of them. Right?
Correct, exactly. And there's 3 experts in like the world, and even they don't agree among themselves. Their views change. So all that to say that I just think on some of these things that are so fundamental, like healthcare reform, we're going to have to do that at 60 in the Senate.
Yeah.
And to do that, we're going to have to find something that we can get buy-in on from the other side.
So this idea that big beautiful bill is going to kick in next year, people are going to start noticing it. We should just talk about that as a Republican Party. That doesn't sound like it would sit.
Well, that's not what the president has said. I mean, what did the president say to Republican senators the other day? It was during the shutdown when he had us over for breakfast. I think the cameras were still on when he said this. He said, if you guys, I believe the words were, if you guys don't start doing something, we're going to get killed in the midterms. I think he's sending the message that, listen, it's the big beautiful bill, the no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security, the child tax credit. That stuff is great. People will feel that. But we need to do more. I mean, I would be very hesitant to sit back and say, yeah, this is great. We passed one big piece of legislation. Let's just coast till the midterms. I mean, A, I don't think that's what we were sent here to do. Mm-hmm. B, just politically, I think that's awfully perilous.
Well, also with the prospect of potentially losing the majority, time is
of the essence.
You can look at the Senate calendar next year. There's a bunch of recesses that weren't there this year. Floor time is going to be at a premium if it's not already, is it not?
Yes, it is. It is going to be at a premium. But I just say this, Burgess, I mean, even setting aside the politics, which I know it's hard to do in this town, you just think about what the right thing to do is. And I just think that when you have the opportunity to accomplish things that can matter for the American people, you should do it. And I think we have a real window here. I mean, I think that's part of what President Trump, what this moment really is for the country, is that, what was so attractive about Donald Trump in 16 and in 24, the American people vote for him. It's that he is not a traditional Orthodox Republican, and even more than that, he's the guy who can shake up the traditional left-right spectrum. And I think the American people have been trying to send a message really for a long time now, because Bernie in many ways was a similar outsider candidate who didn't quite really fit on that spectrum.
Right.
I think people are trying to say, we're tired of the left-right divide as we've known it for 30, 40 years. We're not interested in that. We're the American people. We want results. We want somebody who's going to focus on working people. We want blue-collar families to get the lion's share of attention. That's what we want, and I think it's time to deliver on that.
And you mentioned Bernie Sanders, and I asked you about him before because you guys worked together. You tried to get direct payments in one of those COVID bills back in 2020.
We didn't just try, we did.
So,
we succeeded.
Well, you wanted more, right? Didn't you?
I did want more.
You wanted more.
Hey,
you always want more.
Always want more.
Do you still have a working relationship with him at this point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He and I have co-sponsored several things together. We were just talking about a minimum wage increase the other day. So, listen, I love working with Bernie, and we disagree on a lot of things, obviously. But we have a lot of areas of commonality.
You subscribe to this sort of horseshoe theory of politics where some of the maybe more liberal members of the Senate could get something done with somebody like you?
Well, I mean, it is interesting. You look at some of my co-sponsors on this legislation. I mean, a lot of work with Bernie Sanders, a lot of work with Elizabeth Warren. Now, a lot of work with centrists too.
Sure.
Like Gary Peters, but Peter Welch, who I think would probably describe himself as a progressive, has been a frequent partner of mine. Ben Ray Lujan and I worked together for 2+ years to get payments for folks who are victims of nuclear radiation. I think Ben Ray would proudly describe himself as a progressive.
I agree.
And that legislation we were able to accomplish is generational for his state and for mine.
Is populist the right way to describe your form of politics and the president's, or is there not like a great word for it? We in journalism always kind of try to speak in this shorthand: progressive, liberal, conservative, et cetera. I would describe you as socially conservative, but maybe not economically conservative. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I think populist is probably fine, or I just think of myself as a working class focused guy. I mean, I think the working class republicanism is where I believe the middle of the country is. It's what my state is. I mean, I reflect my state. My state is a working class state. It is a socially conservative working class state.
Yeah.
And I do my best to represent that state to the best of my ability. And then listen, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, the other piece of this for me is I'm a religious believer. As a Christian, the concern for working people, the concern for the needy, the concern for the poor plays a large role in my worldview. And I can't screen that out of my political commitments.
And I think you are probably one of the strongest defenders of the president's tariffs, which on the Republican side, I think a lot of folks have been biting their tongue for the past 10 months because they don't want to criticize the president, but they don't love the tariffs. Are you reflecting your state when you defend the tariffs? And I mean, is that what people in Missouri want, or are people concerned about high prices too? Like, how do you balance those two things?
Well, I think the president is trying to balance them. Listen, it is a balancing act. I mean, on the one hand, my view is I'm willing to, kind of like with healthcare, I'm willing to try just about anything to try to bring jobs back, good manufacturing and other working class jobs back to this country, and to get wages up. It's one of the reasons I've been pro-union. I mean, I've been a supporter of unions. I've introduced labor legislation. I got to be the most pro-union Republican in the Senate. Not that that's a really high bar, but
it's changing though. I mean, I feel like there is more union support.
I
hope your party than there used to be.
I think so.
Looking at the Ohio Senate race, Husted's gotten a couple endorsements from unions in Ohio that typically would have gone to Sherrod Brown. So do you feel like that's changing?
I think it is changing. And my point on that with regard to the tariffs is just that, listen, I think we are due for a change in our approach to try to ask ourselves, what can we do to get more and better jobs back and get wages up? Tariffs can be part of that. I think private sector unions are absolutely a part of that. We need an update to our labor laws to strengthen them. I also say to my friends on the right who are very concerned with woke corporations and wokeism generally, as I am, hey, you know what the best antidote to a woke corporation is an American workforce. If you make these big corporations accountable to American workers, you see a lot different focus. They won't be focused on this or that DEI thing. They'll be focused on jobs, healthcare, take-home pay, right? And I think one of the reasons we've seen the American corporate sector get so far left is increasingly they're not accountable to American workers at all. They have fewer and fewer American workers. They're accountable to their shareholders, kinda. But we need stronger workers. We need more American workers. And part of that is stronger unions.
There's limits to that, though, what we could conceivably build here and pay people a good wage, right?
Well, I mean, there's limits to what we can build, but on any one thing. But listen, I am not willing to give
Like there's a
up.
difference between building trucks and creating T-shirts or something like that.
Sure,
Just use
but
that as an example.
listen, I think that we ought to. I think that conservatives, for those of us who consider ourselves pro-family conservatives,
Yeah.
I think we ought to make it our stated goal to say we want to get an economy where a working class family can support their family on a working class wage.
Yeah.
And that is not possible right now. And actually, the best book on this was written by Elizabeth Warren, The Two-Income Trap. She was right about that. And what the basic premise is, in the 1950s, 60s, into the early 70s, you could support a working family really on one wage, or the parents could sort of juggle it. Now you can't. Now you got to have two wages. You got to work full time. Then you got to pay for childcare for your kids. I mean, it is an impossible trap that many, many, many people in this country are in. I think as conservatives, we should say, listen, our goal is simple. We want working class wages in this country to be strong. We want you to be able to raise a family on your wage. We want you to be able to participate in your community on your wage. We want you to be able to get good health care with that wage. So taking all of that tells me I better be for just about anything that will get wages up for working people.
Yeah, and you tried to get the tax credit, for example, for families much larger in the Big Beautiful Bill than it happened. You also tried to get rid of the future Medicaid cuts in there too, at least to the provider tax.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that say about your party that you make this point and then you kind of are forced to swallow a package that doesn't have those things in it?
Well, I think it means that we've got some soul searching to do as a party yet. I mean, if we're going to be a pro-family party, then we've got to be a party that says we're going to help you buy health care that can support your family. If we're going to be a pro-family party, we need to give tax cuts to people who are struggling to make it. And listen, I'm sure that the Wall Street guys and the tech guys who got a lot of stuff in that package, they all love that. That's fine. But we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing for working people that's going to help them get their job, raise their family, be part of their community, and pursue their dreams? And I think we've got a lot more to do on that.
Do you think the 2028 nominee of your party is going to be in the same mold as President Trump at this point?
I have no idea. But I'll tell you this. I think that if we Republicans are going to be a true majority party, you can see the outline of the president's coalition here.
Yeah.
If that's going to become permanent and become a true lasting majority, it's going to have to be built around working class Americans. We will become a working class party, or we will not be a majority party. Yeah. That's my view. I don't see any other path. If we go back to listen, we've tried the party of the 1990s. The George Bush's party and the Mitt Romney party. That's not a majority party. We know because we ran the experiment over and over.
Can that coalition even be reassembled at this point for Republicans?
No, probably not. And even if it could, that's not a majority coalition. A majority coalition is going to have working class, blue collar folks at the center of it. Has to. And it should anyway, because that's the majority of the country. So if we're focused on them, we're focused on the heart of the country, which is what we should be doing. And by the way, that's where the greatest need is in the country. I mean, who is it who this economy has largely left behind? Those folks. It's working class, blue collar folks. Who are having the most family struggles? Those folks. Who got hit hardest by the opioid epidemic? Those folks. We should be focused on them anyway, just because it's the right thing to do. It's also the key, I think, electorally.
You mentioned being a pro-family party. You and I both have young children. One thing that you've been working on that I'm surprised hasn't had more action is reining in social media for kids, or letting them. You have this chatbots bill. You don't want kids using this, talking to AI chatbots. Why has that not happened yet? Or do you feel like this is something that actually could kind of shoot that left-right paradigm?
I do think, I think for sure that the left-right paradigm can be bridged by the challenges we're seeing from tech, in particular issues that affect kids. I think chatbots, banning chatbot companions for minor kids is absolutely something that could pass Congress. Listen, Chris Murphy and I, Chris and I talking about being on I have a lot of respect for Chris. He's a smart guy, serious guy. He and I don't agree on a whole lot. But we really agree on this, so you've got Chris Murphy and me and Katie Britt and Dick Blumenthal and Dick Durbin, and it's a broad coalition.
Yeah.
And I think what that speaks to is our kids are not safe online, and there is no amount of corporate profiteering that can justify that. Meta doesn't need to make another buck by allowing some chatbot to introduce a kid to the idea of self-harm. They don't need to make that money. They shouldn't. It's the wrong thing to do. So I think that this is something that can pass. But let's just be honest. Why hasn't more social media legislation passed Congress? Money.
Yeah.
Money, the influence of the tech companies. And this is a great opportunity for Congress to stand up and say, you know, we're going to reflect the will of the people, not the will of the corporations. I often say it says we the people in the Constitution, not we the corporations. This would be a good chance to prove it.
Senator Hawley, thanks so much for talking to us
you.
about your party's economic agenda and its future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Please welcome Ilana Shaw, Senior Washington Editor of Semafor, and Shelby Talcott, White House Correspondent of Semafor.
Hello again, folks. I'm in the better seat getting to ask the questions this time. And I wanted to talk with Shelby, who is our White House correspondent, about an element of the project that it's tough to portray in speakers because, well, they're called the outsiders, namely the people without formal government roles who end up having a huge influence on economic policymaking. One of them in particular, you've covered a lot dating back to the campaign trail, Laura Loomer. You've also covered Boris Epstein, the president's personal counsel. You have some unique insights on these folks, but my question to you is this new for Trump that these outside figures are having such a huge pull on his decision making?
The short answer is no. The president has always surrounded himself with these outsiders ever since his first administration and really even before he ever ran for president. And so there are a number of people who, for whatever reason, and the reasons differ, aren't inside of the White House. With Laura Loomer, she really wants to be. But there are people inside the administration who have blocked that. With someone like Boris, he is more comfortable on the outside for various reasons. And the president, I think, is really interested in these figures in part because they're so loyal to him. And these are people who are not being paid by him, or in the case of Laura Loomer, are not being paid by the administration. And so he feels like that support is really genuine. And in the case of someone like Laura Loomer, she is sort of seen as the president's outside enforcer. And so she spends her entire day, up to 20 hours a day, scouring the internet, looking for people who work inside the administration who she feels like are disloyal. And the president likes that. And so he's constantly, for years, surrounded himself by these people who are not inside the administration. Sometimes that frustrates people inside the administration, but at the end of the day, I think these outsiders realize that the only person who really matters is the president himself.
Very well put. There's also the question, since you bring up payment, there's, the conservative internet, I'm tempted to say blogosphere because I'm old, is always a Twitter with rumors about, Loomer's getting paid by X corporate interest. Is X corporate interest also hiring another consultant or two on our list for things? How much does that affect the dynamic and kind of the static around these figures?
Well, I think internally there are people who point that out to the president and who argue that is one of the reasons why there should be barriers, where there should be sort of a process over who can call the president and who can enter the Oval Office. But I don't think that Trump himself cares as much about that. And you see that because he continues to surround himself with these people. He continues to answer these people's phone calls, and he continues to take advice. I remember at the start of this administration, everybody was shocked when Laura Loomer got into the Oval Office and presented the president with a list of staffers who she felt like were disloyal, and 7 or 8 of them ended up getting fired later that day. And so I do think that there are a number of people inside his orbit who are concerned with these potential payments, and they point that out online, and it sort of is a sect of the Republican Party and conservatism where there's a lot of debate and drama. But for Trump himself, he doesn't concern himself with things like that.
That's fascinating. Would you be surprised to see over the next year to 3 as he stays in office them trying to influence policy more? Because so far Loomer has mostly tried to influence personnel, right? But she's kind of dipped her toe closer and closer to policy.
I wouldn't be surprised, particularly with people like Laura Loomer, because at the end of the day, what these people care about is the president and also his agenda. And they care about his agenda in part because it impacts how the president is being viewed. And so it wouldn't be surprising to me at all if you see some of these figures start trying to push more policy or bring things up on social media or calling the president at the end of the day, unbeknownst to maybe the rest of his staff, and making suggestions like that. We've seen that before with the president, so it wouldn't be unprecedented either.
Yeah. You mentioned, Boris kind of preferring to operate on the outside. Another figure on this list, Omid Malik, is kind of a power broker, if you will, for the president's allies in the movement, but has never wanted an official position, right? Whereas Boris has sometimes been pushed more in that direction. How can people who don't really know MAGA that well understand how things like the executive branch club and other social opportunities affect policymaking?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to describe it when you talk about someone like Omid is he used to be a Democrat, is now a Republican, but policy isn't his number one thing. He's focused on making money. And so a lot of these people have seen these opportunities where you have all of these conservative figures gathering together in Washington. A lot of them are extremely wealthy. How can I make money off of that? And inevitably, something like these private executive clubs that have popped up in the case of Omid, that's where they discuss policy. That's where some of the decisions are made. And so even though it, on its face is just sort of a private members club, you have to think about who's in the room for these things. So some of the top administration officials are the people gathering at these private clubs, and inevitably they're talking about policy, they're talking about things that they want to move forward in the next few weeks and years to come.
Well, we're at time. Thank you, Shelby, for this Inside on the Outsiders. And I'm pleased to welcome our next piece of programming. We have to shake.
Thanks.
Please welcome the Tennessee Republican Senator Bill Hagerty and Eleanor Mueller, Congress reporter of Semafor.
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Great to be with you tonight. Good to see you all here in the audience.
So the impetus for this event was mapping out the architects of Trump's economy, and you actually were the most free market, most pro-Trump person that we mapped out. It's a unique position. What's it been like playing that role for the last 14 months?
Well, it's been a actually fabulous time here in Washington to see the transition take place. To see the movement take place as well. I don't know that we would have had the appreciation for free markets that we do now had it not been for some of the more oppressive postures that were undertaken in the previous administration. By that I'm talking about, for example, in the area I think we'll probably discuss, in the digital currency arena, the aggressive posture that the SEC took against the industry, the lack of clarity, everything that was happening was pushing one of the most innovative industries in the world overseas. I didn't want to see that happen. I wanted to see the development happen here, but it required clear legislative framework to be able to accomplish that. And with the change in the gavel and a huge push by me and support from the White House and others, we pushed forward on stablecoin legislation that I think is going to be transformative.
Yeah, well, since you brought it up, stablecoin legislation has been enacted, of course, earlier this year. What lessons from that process do you think are important to take away for the market structure talks happening now?
Well, one thing that, one of the sort of threshold discussions that we had at the outset was, should we try to wrestle with everything at once, market structure, stablecoin, et cetera? And I'm a business person my entire life, and you pick the fights you can win, you build momentum, and you go again. And my view was I could easily articulate the logic for stablecoins, for having that sort of regulatory framework in a way that a lot of my colleagues who perhaps weren't as involved in the financial sector as I've been in my career could understand it. And it's very simple if you think about the benefit of moving into this arena. Part of the argument started by explaining what would happen if we don't, if that makes sense. What would happen if the US dollar sort of sat it out as the world moves toward a digital currency? Well, I think if you appreciate the role of the dollar as reserve currency of the United States, you could see pretty quickly that that role would be diminished significantly if we weren't playing aggressively in that arena. The other piece of it is by moving in this direction, we move from a system that was designed back in the 1970s and 80s, very clunky, one that takes between 5 and 10 days to clear, to the blockchain. The blockchain allows almost instantaneous settlement. So what does that mean? Well, counterparty risk is one of the first things that comes to mind. If you're waiting 5 to 10 days, the person on the other side of the transaction, the company on the other side of the transaction, whoever your counterparty may be, could go bankrupt. They could go away. Something could happen. That's a risk that is eliminated when you have almost instantaneous transactions. For those of you that do overseas currency transactions, you know how currencies fluctuate. You're going to wait 5 or 10 days to see what the actual settlement is going to be, or you're going to settle on the spot. Those are two great benefits. And then if you think about just having that much capital tied up in the payment system, and that turns out to be trillions of dollars of capital, you're going to bring that capital back into the marketplace where it's going to be put to more productive use. So those efficiencies are obviously hugely important. Again, then back to the strategic aspects, reserve currency, very helpful to the dollar, and also it stimulates demand for U.S. Treasuries because every digital dollar in my legislation has got to be backed up dollar for dollar by short-term U.S. Treasury securities. And I think Scott Bessent was very pleased to see stablecoin issuers being put in a position to frankly become the largest owners of U.S. Treasury securities. Not China, not Japan, but benign U.S. stablecoin issuers. I think that's good for everybody.
Senate Republicans and Democrats have been going back and forth for the last several weeks over, what a bipartisan compromise on market structure legislation could look like. Yes. Senator Lummis said yesterday she wants a markup next week. Do you think a bipartisan markup is feasible by then?
So I just saw Mark Warner coming in. You'll probably ask him the same question. We're going to have some meetings tomorrow, and I'll have a better sense for our progress then. But I'll say this. Everyone's posture is positive. They're trying to find a way to get to a resolution. But there are a lot of issues that are on the table. And we've got not only Democrats and Republicans in the Senate, you've got the interest of the House, and certainly the White House and the Treasury Department as well. And then you've got the whole CFTC and ag arena. So it's a little more complicated in the Senate than it is in the House of Representatives because we've got two committees of jurisdiction, the Ag Committee and the Banking Committee, that have to come together. But I think we're making real progress. I hesitate to try to put a time marker on that at this point. I'll leave that to the chairman to decide. But I think Tim Scott has done a great job navigating all of this. And my sense is that we're moving in the right direction. And we may have a hearing, we may have a markup, or we'll see. But I'll have a better sense for that after tomorrow.
All right. Well, crypto is not the only thing you're working on. You're also spearheading an administration-supported expansion of deposit insurance. I mean, what's your understanding of why that's a priority for the White House right now?
My understanding is a painful understanding that I saw happening in real time as Silicon Valley Bank failed. And the legislation that I put forward, just to explain it, it's an expansion of FDIC deposit insurance for a very narrow segment of the market. I'm not talking about a person that's got a bank account, a savings account that's earning interest at the bank and maybe over the $250,000 threshold. I'm not talking about raising that protection. What I'm talking about are transaction accounts. These are the accounts that small, medium-sized companies use to pay their payrolls. You'll have accounts that are running, $3 million, $5 million, $8 million. They need these on a weekly, generally a bi-weekly basis to make payroll payments. These were the accounts that we saw flee the small and medium-sized banks during the whole Silicon Valley Bank disaster. You've got to go back to what happened in 2008. We put legislation in place in the wake of the Lehman crash that created what is known as a too-big-to-fail bank. These GSIBs, or the too-big-to-fails, have this implicit guarantee of the federal government. It's not a level playing field for the community banks, particularly when you get an environment like we were in with Silicon Valley Bank. You think about the risk that you would have for a run on the system if those transaction accounts start fleeing, big chunks of money coming out of the community banks, the regional banks. It could be devastating. And the FDIC actually has said if you put the protection in place that I recommended, it would reduce the risk of a major run. And so this is very sensible legislation, very targeted legislation. This is not to protect Taylor Swift's savings account as some have argued. This is specifically targeted toward mid-sized businesses. And what it does, you think about the work in stablecoin. This is trying to protect and extend U.S. dominance in the banking system of the future. Stablecoin legislation does that, but this does as well because it makes certain that community banks and regional banks are participants in the banking system of the future. Otherwise, we're going to wind up like Canada, where 6 large banks control the entire thing. I don't think we want that. If you look at the growth that takes place in America, more than 50% of the job growth in America from 2021 to 2024 from small and medium-sized companies. Where do they bank? It's at their community bank. Or who gave them their first loan? It was their local or community bank. Those are the banks that do the due diligence. They provide the credit. They provide the fuel for the small and medium-sized businesses that are absolutely critical to our economy.
Some of those too big to fail banks that you mentioned have basically said they don't see a need to expand deposit insurance.
Yeah.
They've said, show us the data on why this is something that needs to be done. What's your response when they inevitably say that to you?
Well, I think they've got the data themselves because their loan officers were calling all of the good clients from the small and medium-sized banks and inviting them to come over because of the risk.
Yeah.
So I think they know the story. And I also think they see an opportunity in this to maintain an advantage. It's not a level playing field. I don't know how any of those banks could argue that it is. Prima facie, it is not. And so this is a way to address the most vulnerable component of that. And that's what this legislation is targeted toward. It doesn't require any increase in what they call the DIF. That's the assessment that banks are charged for FDIC insurance. It's a small amount, but it's a critical amount if something bad like Silicon Valley Bank were to happen again. I want to get ahead of that, put this in place. Scott Best of the Treasury, he and I have advocated for this. We actually had a op-ed piece put in the Wall Street Journal that was very easily misunderstood because it just conflated all accounts. Taylor Swift savings account with these targeted transaction accounts. Scott and I clarified that in a letter to the editor. It got edited. And again, that same misunderstanding is out there. So it's incumbent on us to explain this more clearly, that we're talking about a very focused, targeted arrangement here for non-interest-bearing transaction accounts, not for normal savings accounts. But I think we're going to get the message out. And the need for it is very real. And the downside of not getting it done, I think, is even worse.
When can we expect a Senate markup, do you think?
That'll obviously have to be in the next year, but Senator Scott has been supportive of this, and I think we're going to be moving in the right direction, but it'll be hopefully early in the next year.
All right. Well, that is not, of course, the only thing that Congress is grappling with right now. There's also a lot of pressure on Republicans to act to make life more affordable for Americans when that's what the president, of course, campaigned on. How do you think the party should be talking about prices going into the midterm elections?
Well, I think one thing that we ought to do, and I can just finish the sentence with the stablecoin legislation, by creating more demand for U.S. Treasury securities, that is going to lower the price of treasuries, right? That's going to have a downward impact on rates. That'll be beneficial for housing costs. That'll be beneficial for automotive costs. If you think about what the administration has done more broadly, there's a massive effort underway right now for deregulation. Under the Biden administration, trillions of dollars of additional incremental cost were laid on this economy by excess regulations. Those regulations are coming off. And if you think about that burden being relieved, that's significant, and that is deflationary. Look at what's happened with energy policy. The day that Joe Biden came into office, he issued executive order after executive order, waging war on domestic U.S. energy. What's happened now? President Trump has come into office. They've done a complete about turn. Energy prices are coming down, specifically, the price of fuel at the pump. Everything in America has to be transported. That was inherently inflationary when Biden came into office. It's inherently deflationary now that we've got fuel prices coming down. We've got more work to do on energy writ broadly because there's so much demand for energy from the hyperscalers with AI, et cetera. But we're working at pace at that as well. I don't think anybody's seen more effort going into putting more into the grid, more into our production capacity than right now. So overall, I'd say we see a lot of deflationary movement. And again, I'll take responsibility for the stablecoin piece, but that will have a positive impact. We're expecting a 25 basis point reduction, at the Fed coming out soon. As interest rates come down, which that seems to be the trend, the market certainly isn't pricing in an increase. That'll have a very important impact as well.
Would you support a second reconciliation package to
Yes.
get? You would?
Yes.
Tell me more.
There's a lot more left to be done. I think we got a lot done in the first reconciliation package. That was the so-called one big beautiful bill. But the main effort there was to make permanent and put in place incentives for capital investment in America. And you know me, I'm a business person. I understand this very simple equation. More capital investment begets more jobs beget more economic activity strengthens our nation. From a stronger economy, you can afford a stronger military, and with a stronger military, you have better diplomatic outcomes. All of this fits together. And so, at a very fundamental level, this legislation that we passed earlier this year, the reconciliation package called the One Big Beautiful Bill, puts in place the greatest set of incentives for capital investment that we've ever seen. So that is a foundational component of it. There are many other aspects of this in terms of border security, safety in our cities. That's critical to our economy too. The situation with our military, sadly, I think our military has been depleted in a number of ways, particularly in terms of their munitions, their materiel, but also from a psychological standpoint too. There's a lot of social experimentation going on at the DoD, focus on pronouns rather than lethality. We're sort of getting back to business there. So I'm optimistic the legislation supports that, it funds that. You'll see the NDAA come out, that's the National Defense Authorization Bill, that'll come out very soon. More support for our defense posture. So I'm optimistic that we're moving in the right direction in an environment that frankly is a lot tougher on an international scale. If you think about the situation when President Trump came into office, we've got wars on multiple continents. He's taken decisive steps in the Middle East, working very hard on the situation with Ukraine right now. And there are other parts of the world that I think could be inflamed but are not. And we're going to have to continue to maintain our posture of strength. As we do that, I think we'll see more peace around the world and I think more economic opportunity as a result.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Senator, for spending your evening with us.
Certainly. Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Please welcome the Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner and Burgess Everett, Congressional Bureau Chief of Semafor.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Burgess Everett again. This is Senator Warner.
I'm still Mark Warner again.
He's saying he's the token Democrat, which I found insulting, but I'm sure we have other Democrats in the audience.
So how are you?
We were putting this event together. We're kind of trying to figure out how the economy is changing now with Trump as president. What's your view, and how would you describe the way that he's running the economy right now as the American president?
Well, before I get to that, let me just, we may get to one of these issues, and my friend Bill Hagerty was up here.
Okay.
We went through, I spent a ton of time on the stablecoin legislation, and now we're on, I wish he'd been in the room from day one on the market structure, which is gnarly and much harder. But Bill is a really good guy. In terms of Trump on the economy, chaos. Even when he's, and there's a lot of things he's directionally right, saying, all right, Europe, you've got to step up and pay more on military. But then to kind of offend all your allies, the up and down on tariffs is kind of insane, I think. And it leaves, as a former business guy, the thing you hate the most is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And vis-a-vis China, which I think is our strategic national security and technology competitor of our time, I think we had this opportunity where many nations wanted to align with us. I think China had somewhat stubbed its toe on its Belt and Road Initiative where, countries in Africa, South America, elsewhere, they didn't get the job they thought with the Belt and Road Chinese project. They got crappy infrastructure and they still ended up in debt. And instead of, seeing that as an opportunity for us to open doors where the rare earth minerals are, where the population growth is, he disparages countries or makes insane comments like, Somalia, awful, or using foul language about African countries. And then at the same time, kind of arbitrarily does tariffs that don't seem based on a strategic policy where many countries now view China as a more stable long-term partner. And a perfect case in point.
Because they don't have elections, they just have...
And it's also like, for 40 years, and I'm long India, I'm the chair of the India caucus, proud of that. We've been working for years. India has been realigning more with us. I think particularly young Indians understand that the Indian diaspora here in America is one of our greatest assets. And we suddenly, he has taken on, I think based on kind of a personality fight with Modi, where I don't want the Indians to buy Russian oil. He wouldn't whack China on that. He stuck India with a 50% tariff. The third biggest purchaser of Russian oil is Turkey, and they got a 15% tariff. So I think there has been a chaotic approach. And then, when it comes like technology, and I think again, the Biden crowd, with chip caps probably didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But the idea of how we guard cutting edge technology, even if we're not going to have chip caps, we at least should have security about leakage on some of our most critical intellectual property.
Talking about these NVIDIA
Yeah, and
sales.
one day he's for it, that kind of technology, and then the next day he is saying sales as long as there is the American government gets a cut.
Yeah.
If I have to say this, and I don't think this is, I think there's almost, I'm not sure where the Republican Party went, because I think there's a Trumpism group, and the Democrats, we got our own problems about figuring things out. But if there had been any previous president, Republican or Democrat, that was taking equity shares in major American companies, or taking a whole series of, you don't get some of the cutting edge companies, the way almost as I say this as a former venture capitalist, taking shares in those, you'd be called a socialist. So I think it has been a...
Senator Hollywood, he was just up here, he probably would call it populist. Is that...
Well, I mean, it's just...
Potato,
it's
potato.
not... The notion... Like on chips, and John Cornyn and I did the chips bill.
Yeah.
We should have probably, and shame on us, we probably should have had some back end if this had, that there was, excessive profits or things that had home run, the American taxpayer would get something back. But the notional idea of taking an equity share in a company that still has got a really rough road to hoe, and what that says to other American innovation companies, I mean, frankly, the absolute leader in the space is TSMC in chips, and we need to find ways to bring more TSMC intellectual property here to America. Will TSMC make that move if one of its major competitors, the American government, has a big equity stake? So I think it is the most unorthodox approach I've ever seen. So far the markets have obviously done well, and the president celebrates that. But it's been...
Has that surprised you, by the way?
Yeah, I think there has been, yes. I think there's been this sense of, well...
Are you waiting for the shoe to drop?
Well,
there?
I mean, it's a little bit of he's doing so many things on tax and deregulatory that we're going to turn a blind eye to all the others. I think at some point this will all catch up. I think, the effect of the tariffs, I think it has not had the dramatic effect we thought, but I think people have cooked that in. But as we get into next year, I think there will be a huge effect. And one of the things, since you gave me this open-ended question, I don't want to use up all the time on the first question.
We've got 7 more minutes, so just keep rolling.
But, I think the thing, as somebody that's trying to get rehired one last time, I think the issue in
just one last time?
Yeah,
this is it.
And I'm not going to be one of those guys they're going to take out in the
Okay, well, you heard it here
stretcher.
first. One last term.
I've said that to other folks. I think one of the issues of our time, definitely by 28 and potentially by 26, is the economic disruption brought around by AI.
Yeah.
And I'm not as worried about, job loss where company X says we're going to fire this many people. I think where the dislocation is going to come is on entry-level jobs coming out of college. We're already at 9% recent college graduate unemployment. I think that number could go to 25%. And what that would have would be a double whammy, because it would not only affect that age cohort, but all those parents who dropped 200 grand are going to be really pissed off when their kids did everything.
And in debt probably, right?
And in debt. And I think what we got to do is not be I'm a pro-tech guy, pro-innovation guy. I think AI will create a next generation of jobs, but there's going to be a 3 to 5 year transition where I've been spending a lot of time with the AI entities saying, you got to help us figure out that transition, because you'll say, government, you guys will screw it up. Okay, fine. You figure it out, but you got to help pay for it as well on what this transition looks like. And I think it will be an incredibly potent issue. And if we can get the community, AI community, to actually engage with this, and so far, again, don't believe anything till it's down on paper, I think it'll be an opportunity. But this, if we get it wrong, you could see this populist left and right movement, anti-technology, anti-innovation, which I think, again, long term.
Does that scare you as a tech guy?
It worries me. It also worries me as a pro-American innovation leader that could happen. And I don't, again, see, even within the realm of AI safety, the administration is so rolled back, and we've accepted so much we can't do anything because we could lose the race with China, that I think we're not treating with enough seriousness. And I do think this job dislocation, and particularly with entry-level jobs, and if we look back, even in good faith, a long time ago, 3 years ago, we said, well, what we ought to do is at least make everybody a coder.
That's not a good job choice.
So we just, anyway, and again, I wish there was, entities in the White House thinking not only about the technology competition with China on AI, which again we send mixed messages with on chip caps and other things, or chip restraints or not, but also this economic dislocation.
So you mentioned AI, and they think government will screw it up. Do you think government will screw it up, or do you think you guys need to do something?
I think you got to have some guardrails. I think if there was a single consensus of the many things we screwed up, 10 years ago, if we put some guardrails on social media, we would have a hell of a lot healthier group of young people. And I think, again, everybody across the board. And now, we're kind of chasing after this, and I think some of the efforts to try to,
out of the bag, right?
Caps on, phones in schools and all that stuff. The transformation brought about by social media is tiny compared to what AI will do. When you suddenly, your friend, your advisor becomes your chatbot, when there is no distinction between what is real or not. I think about the old-fashioned days in 2016 where the Russians had to create bots to spread misinformation, disinformation. That is so yesterday's news.
It's antiquated.
And so I think there's a way to continue to advance innovation in a major way, but still building in some safety constraints, and at least acknowledging, even though AI will have enormous productivity increases and good upside, that there's going to be this economic dislocation, and we need a real debate on this. And I do think most folks, and again, it's not just the AI companies. I mean, look at what Walmart has said about in terms of its level of job dislocation. This is something we can get ahead of, as opposed to chasing the tail afterwards.
So you want to talk about crypto? So Senator Hagerty,
no, I don't really want to talk about it.
He's been a positive force. It sounds like.
Bill is this is market. Stable coin was on a relative basis, a simple concept. We got 5 things in market structure that we've got to deal with. We got to deal with the question of ethics, and legislators should have some ethical constraints. I think the president and the vice president need some ethical constraints. We need to deal with what we're calling quorum to make sure that even as we give a lot of the regulatory authority to the agencies, you got to actually have the administration follow the law and make sure CFTC and SEC, they get to have the majority, but the Democrats ought to have the minority. You got to have members on these bodies to do the rules. There's a huge issue around how these entities, and I can go way too nerdy too quickly, yield versus rewards, how you sort that out. And then you got the 2 biggest things, asset classification. These are new, but how you don't drive such a hole between securities law and commodities law that you suddenly says, okay, if I tokenize something, you can avoid any regulatory oversight at all. And then you've got all of the notion of what's called DeFi, decentralized finance, which again is new, but we've got to figure out a way to sort that out. And I think people are working in good faith. The worst thing in the world, and I hope, I've got meetings on this again tomorrow, that if there's an effort to try to bum rush a partisan-only markup, it will be a mess. Because again, you can't do it partisan.
So you can't get this done this year.
Well, listen, I think at least in committee. I have never seen an issue that is kind of more intellectually challenging and that both teams have been working in good faith for hours and hours on end. And there are, and I know we've got folks from the White House coming, there are wide segments of the bill where my Republican friends are saying, well, we can't sign off on that until we get White House approval. So I think we'll get there, but this is so important.
But you're telling the chairman, don't rush this.
I'm saying like this, if you accept the premise, and I was a crypto skeptic, for a long time, but I think it's here and here to stay, and I agree with Bill, we need American rules, we need to lead the innovation, but you can't say on one hand, this is the most important thing ever, and a lot of the crypto guys say, and you guys are probably too stupid to figure it out, and then in the same breath say, we need it done yesterday.
Right. So we just happen to have maybe one of the few people in the room who can tell us what the heck's going on in Venezuela. My last question for you is...
Oh my God, the time is over. I would have loved to
This ship was seized today off the coast.
Well, one of the things to say, if we can interdict a vessel of this size, why can't we interdict some of these drug boats? I think,
rather than blowing them up.
Well, and again, there's two issues here. Narco-terrorists, bad, absolutely, we have to go after them. The legal opinions that equate this to, the effect of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and if you say drugs are the same as having, in effect, the same as bombs or guns, and what that would then mean in terms of your ability to take out these things, huge problem. I am hugely concerned on the strike on September 2nd that I think the American public ought to see the video, and if not the American public, at least Congress, because what I am worried about, and you can't on one hand say we're going to show these videos and brag about them, and then in the next breath when there's some, oh my gosh, what's going on, the secretary and others say, well, we can't show this, right? Because there are colleagues of mine, more on the Democratic side, but some of the Republicans who say, this, could this mean American military are taking illegal actions? I think when we get in that space, that is such a damning charge. I don't want to even get close to that until we get all the facts. And there are both the video and there is a whole series of documents that we've not gotten as well. So we want to pursue that. On Venezuela itself, let me acknowledge, Maduro's a bad guy. And one of the many mistakes the Biden administration made was when the Venezuelan people voted overwhelmingly to throw out Maduro. The fact that we didn't put pressure on particularly Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico to push him out, huge mistake. Does that mean we should now go to potentially armed conflict when the president has not made the case to the American public or to the world, for that matter, is really worried. I got a lot of the families of the sailors who were down there, who were many of them home ported out of Norfolk, saying, I don't want my son and daughter, one, are they going to be in a war in harm's way, and two, are what they're doing, what's our goal? And I don't think we've articulated that goal in a way that passes muster with the public, with the Congress, and Lord knows with the world. And you don't have to be a history not to realize that America's history of intervention in the Caribbean, Central America, and South America has been spotty at best.
Sure. Senator Warner, we got crypto, Venezuela. I didn't get to ask you if you're still eating those microwave tuna melt sandwiches from back in the day.
If you got 2 minutes and 29 seconds, you will never get back. Google Warner and tuna melts, and you'll never think about me the same way.
And there's the headline.
You may think about me awful, but
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Please welcome the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, James Blair, and Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent of Semafor.
Thank you for taking the time. I know Christmas is crazy at the White House, so we're going to get right into it because I have like 3 hours of questions and 15 minutes to do it. So I want to start with a broad question. The core premise of our Architects Project is sort of how Washington has changed under President Trump. And I would argue that he's more comfortable than a lot of his predecessors involving government and the economy. And I wonder if you would agree with that assessment.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, First of all, I think that government is very involved in the economy, for better or for worse. That's not really a new phenomenon under this president. I mean, we're talking about a healthcare issue of the day. That's like 20% of the American economy, and it is almost completely somehow in some way run by the government, whether through regulation or just government programs. So the government's involved. I don't know that that's always a good thing, but that's the case. And I think where a lot of that narrative has come from really is related to projects of national strategic importance that the president has gotten engaged in and gotten the administration engaged in. These are things like rare earths, critical minerals. There's been a lot of talk about this. Chips, obviously. And he brings a business mindset. A lot of this money, so in the Intel deal, for example, money had already been given to Intel by the American taxpayer under the CHIPS Act, like $10 billion. And it's just given to these companies, and there's nothing for the taxpayer for that, and there's really no follow-up to know whether or not it was good. And so Intel just said, well, we'll convert that to equity. So that's held by American taxpayers. But the strategic goal is really that if Intel, as an American chip maker, can turn things around, that's very good for us as just a matter of national security and sort of strategic for the economy. The same is true in critical minerals. I mean, the reason the situation is the way it is around the globe is because China has created a processing monopoly in this space for the entire world, not just us. Like, 95+% of critical mineral rare earth processing is in China. And it's also got more active in the mining space. And frankly, they price out, and this is, you can read this in the Wall Street Journal, it's not my opinion, they price out the rest of the world. And so when you have essentially a state actor, which is okay, that's their way of doing things, but they're doing things that are important to their country, and I think our view is, sometimes you just have to pragmatically, and the president's pragmatic at the end of the day, you have to do what needs doing, and in this case, the structure doesn't work with private capital probably to make those investments. So he's been willing for the government to do what it has done historically, but instead of just giving out money, it's getting something for the taxpayer in return and making sure that the goals are actually accomplished strategically for the American economy.
And when we're talking about the economy, just the other day, the president gave his economy an A+++++, to write it down to make sure I had enough pluses. A lot of Americans aren't feeling that. So do you see at all a need to shift some of that messaging to better acknowledge that some voters aren't feeling as jazzed about the economy in this right now?
Well, I think what's going on is that we inherited the worst inflation in at least 40 years. We say ever, but no one can dispute at least 40 years in this country. And as we know, prices shoot up during inflation, but they don't necessarily just come back down. Inflation compounds on itself. Inflation is halted, and we've seen that. And there should have been a bigger rate cut today. The president has been very vocal that the Fed was too late to raise the rates to begin with to tame inflation. We spent all this time talking about transitory inflation, allegedly, but we view that as a very political decision. And now they've been too late to cut the rates. But the fundamentals of the economy are good, but I think what people are expressing is mostly about affordability. It's about whether or not, it's really those sticky high prices. Prices have come down in a lot of areas, right? Gasoline prices have come down. A lot of grocery prices have come down. But still, the last time people were feeling really great economically was the end of the Trump years. And things got so bad under Biden that we have a hole to dig out of. So the real wages in America on average went down by over $3,000 under Joe Biden. And we've gotten about 1,300 of that back in just a few months in the administration in the early piece. But still people don't necessarily feel whole. So what he's conveying is that things are going in the right direction, and we understand that people still want to see relief, and they'll see a lot of relief that they don't know is coming in their tax cuts in April. I mean, when you do surveys and all of these things, you ask people People don't know actually that the tax cuts happen. There's a lot of lack of education about what's coming, but in January people are going to change their withholding, and they're going to see wages go up that are in a wide swath of Americans are affected by the working class tax cuts, and they're going to get a big tax return in April that a lot of them aren't expecting because the tax cuts are retroactive to January 2025. So they're going to get this entire year and this return. And I think we feel very strongly that as those things compounds, people will start to feel better. And it is good for us that wages are outpacing any price growth, but we're undoing 4 years of damage. So we've made a lot of progress. And the president's not going to stop working until people are not only made whole, but are better off than they were before. And that's where we are.
So you were saying that Americans should start feeling better in the first half of next year.
Yeah, I think they will start feeling better. I do. And look, I mean, we all know this doesn't happen overnight, but we have laid a lot of the groundwork, and that is coming to fruition now. We're in a rate cutting cycle now. We expect that to continue. The cost of capital is going to come down. Capital is going to be more accessible at more affordable rates, as it should be. Tax cuts are going to kick in. It is the biggest working class tax cut in American history. People are going to see that. They're going to feel that. They're going to get it in a lump sum. And then again, prices are coming down. And as you see prices come down, the concern about it to voters tends to follow it. Like gasoline, people are not saying in surveys anymore that they think gas is high. That's because gas in I think in 22 states now, it's hit $2.75 a gallon on average. It's substantially lower than it was a year ago, much less 2 years ago. So it's going in the right direction. We are making progress, but we're obviously got work to keep doing, and we're not going to stop.
And another aspect of the economy affordability question has been tariffs. And I know that the president has several times indicated that he wants to pursue tariff rebate checks for a lot of Americans.
Yes.
That seems most likely you'd need Congress to do that.
Yep.
Can we expect to see a more formal push for legislation on that next year, maybe in another reconciliation bill? I know the president today had suggested that there might not be a need for one.
Yeah, I do think that you will see us push for that and continue to push for that. I mean, obviously Congress right now, over this kind of period of the year, is focused on NDAA, appropriations. We've got another government funding piece coming up at the end of January, and then obviously healthcare is an ongoing conversation. I think as we turn into the year, we're open to another reconciliation bill. We'd love to do that. It just depends on, that's really a partisan tool, and then obviously there's bipartisan pathways too. And which one opens up, I think, is largely contingent on whether or not the Democrats, want to work on anything, which heretofore they've sent a pretty clear message that they're not interested in getting stuff done.
And I want to touch on the healthcare aspect, but quickly on affordability, I thought it was really interesting. You talked about Mamdani a few weeks ago, and you complimented him on how he was able to talk about affordability, and that's part of the reason why you said that he was successful in the election. Were you surprised by how friendly Mamdani's visit to the White House was?
No,
was it weird?
I'm not surprised. I mean, the president will speak to anyone. That's one of the great things about him, and that's what people misunderstand. I mean, the president's a business guy. He thinks that if you sit across the table, even if you disagree and you work things out, you can obviously, have some level of success. So, I mean, he would say that he disagrees on the path pretty violently, probably, with Mamdani on most of these things, but they agree on some of the end goals. So, to the degree that creates even 1% of room to work together, that's okay. I will say, I don't think I complimented Mamdani. I didn't. I just analyzed what the facts are, in my opinion, and that was the point, which was he talked about things that voters are saying matter to them, and they just that conversation you're referencing was in the context of the Virginia elections, and I was critical of some of the Republicans. You got to meet the voters where they are. You got to talk about what's important to them, and if you want to talk to them about the sky being blue, but they're interested in whether or not the wind is blowing north, it doesn't really matter that you're talking about the sky. They want to hear about the wind, and that's the way voters are. So you have to talk to them about what they care about in campaigns.
Well, speaking about what voters care about, healthcare, right? There's a lot of debate right now on the Hill. The president's plan involves direct payments. Republicans have several competing plans. Is the White House still talking about releasing its own plan?
I was on the Hill yesterday talking to leaders about healthcare, and we'll have some probably at the White House later this week and into next week. There's a lot of a lot of lines of effort working in both the House and the Senate, and I think the question is where do those ultimately come together and what kind of sort of package we can put forward. I do think, I met with the president as recently 2 days ago about healthcare. We're definitely interested in putting things forward, but we're kind of going through the legwork to see. We're not interested in managed failure. Chuck Schumer is sending a clear message. He doesn't care about the enhanced premium tax credits. He's not trying to solve the issue. The vote he's putting up tomorrow in the Senate on a 3-year clean extension, he wants to fail. He knows it's a non-starter. It is more than he asked for to reopen the government just a couple of months ago. It is a political maneuver. It is an attempt to have the issue fail and then campaign against us. President doesn't take that view. President wants to put something together that can actually lower costs and have an impact now. That takes more work and sort of, rallying support on Capitol Hill than just putting up show votes, which is clearly what Schumer's plan is right now. So hopefully we'll be able to bring that together over the next week or two and have something that we can really push forward.
And is an ACA subsidy extension with limits still an option on the table? I know that there had been a proposal that wasn't quite finished that had come out from the White House involving a subsidy extension. Is that on the table?
I think we'll have to see what happens and how, everything is a matter of how things come together. What the president wants is to stop giving these insurance companies money. Their premiums or their stock prices have gone up since the ACA passed by anywhere from like 700 to 1,200%. So the insurance companies are doing great. The American people are not doing great on health care. Most people aren't happy with their health care if they pay for it. It's either too expensive or the care is not great. And overwhelmingly, people say employer-sponsored health insurance. When you ask what are people happiest with, they tend to be happiest with employer-sponsored health insurance, which is about 180 million people. Obamacare is 7% of the insurance market, give or take. So it's actually a very small segment of the total insurance market that this issue even affects. And the president is trying to say, look, we need to deal with broad-based healthcare issues where healthcare is too expensive. The only groups doing great are insurance companies and some other healthcare providers. It's too expensive. It's not that good a care. And you can ask, I'll pull the group. How many are you happy with your healthcare? And if you say, I'm pretty happy, I bet your employer sponsors it. And if you have a complaint, I bet you're on a different program. So the president wants to address those issues at a real meaningful level.
Is the president still open at all to negotiating with Democrats, or do you see reconciliation as Republicans' best path forward at this point on healthcare?
We're always open to conversations with Democrats, but again, Chuck Schumer putting up a 3-year...
Do you think it's likely?
If they come to the table and want to have a real discussion, but putting up a 3-year extension vote in the Senate is not any attempt at negotiation. That's sending a clear message. It says we're not going to negotiate. We want this to fail, and we want to campaign against you on it. It is very clear.
So potentially reconciliation is Republicans.
They have our phone numbers. Our staff talks to their staff at time. We await any meaningful engagement, and we will see what happens. We would love to have bipartisan health care that actually lowers costs for people. Something we're very interested in that we think should be a bipartisan issue is lowering drug prices. That's a big push of the president's. It's been a centerpiece of this administration, and it affects a wide swath of people. Drug prices are a problem for everybody, and it doesn't matter what type of insurance plan you're on or not. Everybody thinks drugs are too high, and that also affects the government programs, Medicare, Medicaid, these sorts of things. So that's driving up costs everywhere. We think that should be a place where we could get wide agreement, where we've had a lot of success, where we actually have major pharmaceutical companies, the biggest in the world, at the table saying, you know what, President Trump, you're right. We're not going to let the rest of the world ride off American patients' back anymore. We're going to bring fairness in pricing. We're not going to, and that's what happens right now. People all across the world, we want them to get care, but it's coming at the expense of the American people who also need help. And the president wants to bring balance to that. That should be an area of bipartisan agreement. So we'll see.
And I want to close us out with a broader question. Just a few minutes ago, Senator Hawley said to my colleague that Republicans in Congress risk real trouble in the midterms if they don't do more on the president's agenda. I'm wondering if you agree with that.
I think that we should work as hard as we can every day, and that's what we're doing. We should actually try to get things done. The Democrats, we're a year out of the midterms. There's a lot of game to be played here. The Democrats don't have a lot of credibility on the issues. They might say they do right now. They don't have a lot of credibility when we actually get into campaign season, in my view, on the issues that are of import. to the American voter. So let's talk about affordability. They just tried to run that campaign in Tennessee 7, and Matt Van Epps undercut the campaign because she's for every tax hike that's ever happened in Tennessee. She has supported it. And every Democrat in Congress voted against every tax cut that we put in place. Right now, you have Democrat states, New York, Illinois, DC, they are rapidly rewriting their tax codes right now to capture the tax deductions that Republicans gave them on a partisan basis. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime pay. They're writing what they call add backs into their tax forms right now. There's a big piece on this in USA Today about 10 days ago, and I referenced it yesterday on television, where Democrat states are jumping in and they're taking federal tax deductions that were passed by Republicans, and they're saying, you're not getting that tax break, we're going to take it into our state coffers. I promise you there's going to be a backlash for that.
But I think another issue that Republicans are having is the fact that Donald Trump has a lot of low propensity voters that really only turn out for him. And I know Susie Wiles had mentioned this the other day. What does the Republican Party need to do differently in order to not rely on the president so much to turn out his voters?
Well, I mean, I think that the president's the leader of the party, so for better or for worse, they're gonna need his help. But what they need to do is they need to deliver for people. They need to at least try to deliver for people. And I will say, I think Congress is doing that. There are critics, including in our party, but I think Congress is working pretty hard given the circumstances. There's some things I would like to see that are that they could be more aggressive on. But I expect a lot of action still in the new year. I think there's going to be a lot of action. I don't think Republicans are laying down, and Democrats are not interested in accomplishing anything in this Congress. That's what they've showed us every step of the way. The lack of UC confirmations in the Senate says we are going to try to obstruct this administration, which won the popular vote, which won every swing state, which over 70 million Americans voted for. We're going to try to obstruct them from doing anything. We're seeing that right now. We do a tax bill that passes, and then you have blue states saying we're going to obstruct the American people from getting the tax cuts that the United States Congress passed and the president signed into law. So we have to fight against that obstructionism. I think the key is to just keep doing things, just keep trying, keep kicking the door down, and then ultimately giving people something to vote for. I think not only what we have done in the past, we need to obviously campaign a message on, but we need to make new commitments for the future so people have something to come vote for.
Great. Well, we are more than out of time, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you for attending today's event, and a special thanks to our partner, Bank of America. We can't wait to welcome you back to Gallup in 2026.